If you are interested in watching Naruto fanfiction stories, please help get the channel to 1,000 subscribers. Do not subscribe just because you would like to show support. Please only subscribe if you are interested in watching these types of stories. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this series, called What If Goku Remembered the Saiyans? My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like and subscribe to the page. Also, leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin. Kakarot and Raditz landed with Bardock in a deserted area. Waiting for them were Tien, Yamcha, and Chi-Chi. "Good to see you guys," Kakarot said to his two friends. "Where's Kyoitsu?" he asked. "He's decided that he couldn't keep up with us," Tien said flatly. "That's too bad," Yamcha said. "Let's get started," Kakarot said, pulling out a capsule from his pocket. He pressed it, and it opened to reveal a massive trunk. "What's that?" Raditz asked. "Training equipment," Kakarot said, pulling out a fighting uniform similar to his. "The weights will help get you stronger faster." "Weights?" Raditz asked. "You're wearing weighted clothing?" "Yeah," Kakarot said. "I wear it most of the time." A few minutes later, all of the fighters were adorned in their custom fighting uniforms. "Daddy," Bardock asked, "do I get one too?" Kakarot smiled warmly as he handed his son a fighting uniform identical to his own, only smaller. "You sure do," he said with pride. He turned to the others, his eyes sparkling with determination. "Now we are ready to begin. Today's training will consist of sparring, so we can see where everyone is at. Tien, you will fight Yamcha, and I will fight Raditz." "Who will I fight?" Bardock asked eagerly. Kakarot glanced down at his son. He hadn't really planned on having Bardock spar just yet, as he wasn't nearly strong enough to hold his own against any of the other fighters. Then he noticed that Yamcha had brought Chi-Chi along. They seemed to be fairly close in power, he thought. "Son, you and Chi-Chi will be sparring." "What?" Chi-Chi exclaimed in shock. "I'm sparring against a child?" "Yes," Kakarot said firmly, "but I've been training him myself, so don't underestimate him." Minutes later, the fighters had paired off and were sparring. Most of them were moving clumsily, adjusting to the weights they were wearing. Kakarot leaned his head to one side as Raditz threw a punch at his face. Dodging the blow from his brother was child's play, though he was surprised at how well Raditz had adapted to the weights. They really weren't slowing him down much. "You take to weighted clothing fairly fast," Kakarot remarked as he dodged another punch. "I'm used to planets with higher gravity than this," Raditz replied honestly. "Our homeworld has nearly 10 times the gravity of this one, and I grew up there," he continued. "The weights take some getting used to, but in this low gravity, they aren't too difficult to handle." "That's bound to make training more effective," Kakarot said, dodging yet another attack from Raditz. "It does," Raditz agreed, throwing another punch at his brother. "Most beings from higher gravity planets are stronger than those from low gravity planets like this one. It's one of the considerations when we send out warriors to take over a planet." Meanwhile, Bardock threw a punch at Chi-Chi, but the woman barely dodged the blow. She was having some trouble adjusting to the weights, but not as much as Bardock was. After throwing the punch, the extra weight of the wristbands was too much for the child, and he lost his balance, falling to the ground. The boy quickly recovered, however, and was soon charging at Chi-Chi again. She had to admit the boy was quick and strong. She couldn't dodge all his attacks, and the ones she had to block had some force behind them. She started to counterattack with kicks and punches of her own, probing the boy's defenses, still a little afraid of hurting the child. Bardock blocked the blows with more skill than she had expected, so she continued to press the attack, grinning. She had almost forgotten how much fun it was to spar against an opponent who could give her a workout. Piccolo watched the scene from a distance, his eyes narrowing as he observed the 6 fighters spar. He knew he was still no match for Kakarot. Over the past 5 years, Kakarot had grown immensely stronger, and despite Piccolo's rigorous training, the gap between their powers remained vast. Now, there was another fighter with Kakarot. Curiosity gnawed at him. He needed to find out what was going on. Kakarot dodged another kick from Raditz before launching a light punch of his own, which Raditz managed to block. The impact caused the older Saiyan to stagger back, but he quickly recovered, sending a roundhouse kick at his brother's head. Kakarot raised an arm, lazily blocking the blow, and countered with a punch to Raditz's face. The blow broke through Raditz's defenses, connecting with his cheek and sending him flying into a rock outcropping. Raditz shot to his feet, ready to continue the spar, but stopped when he noticed Kakarot turning his head away. "What is it?" he asked. Piccolo is here, Kakarot said, his eyes scanning the distance. Come on out, Piccolo, he yelled. I want to talk. Seconds later, Piccolo floated down to where Kakarot and the others had been sparring. What do you want? He asked, his tone sharp and suspicious. I want you to join us, Kakarot said, straightforwardly. And why would I do that? Piccolo asked, his eyes narrowing further. Well, Kakarot began, we're going to face off against Frieza. We could use your help. I don't care about this Frieza, Piccolo said dismissively. I'm going to finish you off and rule this world. He's the one Chomper was working for, Kakarot explained. I figured you'd like the opportunity to get a rematch with him. Piccolo's expression shifted slightly, considering the offer. Fine, count me in, he said finally. Great, Kakarot said, a smile spreading across his face. I have a set of weighted clothing for you. No need, Piccolo replied, pointing to his cape and turban. You're not the only one who has learned that trick. All right, Kakarot said, his voice turning serious. I want both of you to attack me, Raditz scoffed. Saiyans fight alone, he said defiantly. Not when they are much weaker than their opponent, Kakarot reminded his brother. Besides, I need a good workout, and you weren't giving me one on your own. Fine, Raditz grumbled, charging at his brother and throwing a punch at his face. Kakarot dodged the blow and moved to take the offensive, but before he could throw a punch, Piccolo attacked him from the side with a flurry of kicks and punches. Kakarot raised his arms, deflecting the blows, but before he could counterattack, Raditz charged at him with renewed vigor. Kakarot ducked below Raditz's punch and shot a fist at Piccolo's stomach, but the Green Warrior moved out of the way just in time. Piccolo countered with a punch, but Kakarot managed to block it. Unfortunately, this left him open to Raditz's attack, and his brother's fist connected with the side of his face, sending him stumbling back. Kakarot quickly recovered and sent a punch at his brother, connecting with his stomach and causing Raditz to double over, blood spurting from his mouth. Piccolo seized the opportunity, gathering a beam of energy in his hands and shooting it at Kakarot. The beam hit Kakarot's face just as he turned to deflect it. Piccolo charged forward, delivering a relentless series of attacks to Kakarot's open guard. Kakarot turned to block Piccolo's blows, but was immediately assaulted by Raditz. A left hook from his brother sent Kakarot flying back. Flipping in midair, Kakarot charged back at his two opponents. He focused on Raditz first, pummeling his brother with a barrage of kicks and punches, mercilessly pounding him until Raditz fell to the ground, unconscious. Kakarot then raised an arm to block Piccolo's punch and turned to attack him with the same intensity. Without the distraction of another opponent, Piccolo only lasted a few seconds before he too lay on the ground, unconscious. Later that night, Kakarot lay in bed with Bulma. How'd the training go? She asked, her eyes filled with curiosity. It was all right, Kakarot said, stretching his sore muscles. I noticed Raditz was a bit beat up, Bulma said with a laugh. I thought you were going to go easy on him. I did, Kakarot replied with a smirk. I had to let him get a workout before I knocked him out. Bulma's expression turned serious. Just be careful, she said softly. I do worry about you. I wish there was something I could do to help keep you safe. There are a few things you can do, Kakarot said thoughtfully. Is there any way you can copy the Saiyan armor that Raditz and I have? It would be handy for the others to have some protection when the fighting starts. Sure, Bulma said, her eyes lighting up with determination. Anything else? Yes, Kakarot said, his voice steady. Is there any way you can make a room that multiplies the planet's gravity? Bulma considered the idea, her mind already racing with possibilities. I don't know, she said slowly. The theory is definitely possible. I should be able to come up with something. Thanks, love, Kakarot said with a warm smile. That would be a great help. Meanwhile, Krillin looked around in puzzlement as he reached the end of Snake Way. Where's this King Kai? He wondered aloud. Soon, his gaze moved up into the sky where he saw a small planet floating in the distance. Figuring that had to be the place, he leapt off of Snake Way and toward the planet. As he got halfway there, the planet's gravity took over and pulled him in. Krillin landed hard in the grass near a big tree. Man, that hurt, he said, getting up sluggishly. He soon noticed it was harder to move than he expected. It feels like I weigh a ton, he mused. That's because the gravity is 10 times that of Earth, a voice said from behind him. Krillin turned to see a blue alien, about his height but much plumper, sporting black sunglasses and antennae sprouting from his head. You must be King Kai, Krillin said, his voice filled with awe. I am. The god replied with a nod. So what brings you to my planet? Well, I figured you already knew, Krillin replied, scratching his head. You got me, King Kai said with a chuckle. I do know why you're here. In fact, I sense that I know more about it than you do. Kami contacted me and told me there would soon be a war with a tyrant named Frieza, and he needed me to make you as strong as possible so you can help in the fight. All I know is that an alien came down and killed me, Krillin said. I figured I'd be training to beat him. No, King Kai said, shaking his head. The one they call Kakarot easily beat him and convinced him to join forces against the one called Frieza. They joined forces? Krillin said in disbelief. Yes, King Kai said. It turns out that this Raditz is Kakarot's brother. I've been watching the events down on Earth with great interest. I'm so glad my death has entertained you, Krillin said, sarcasm dripping from his voice. King Kai burst out laughing. You are a funny man. You have passed the test. I will train you. Test? Krillin asked, bewildered. What test? I don't train anyone without a sense of humor, the blue alien said. You made me laugh, so I will train you. Great, Krillin said with a sigh of relief. Let's get started. All right, your first test is to catch Bubbles, King Kai said with a mischievous grin. Who's Bubbles? Krillin asked, confused. Bubbles is my pet monkey, King Kai said. Now, you may think that catching him is easy, but in this gravity, it will be more difficult than you think. Also, you will wear these. King Kai pulled out an undershirt, wristbands, and boots. They are weighted to make your training harder. Krillin picked up the undershirt, his eyes widening. It must weigh a ton, he said, feeling the heft of the clothing. Back on Earth, Kakarot dodged to the left as Raditz threw a punch at his head. The younger Saiyan backflipped and brought a boot up, kicking Raditz in the face. The long-haired Saiyan flew back and landed against the wall of the gravity room, the impact echoing through the chamber. Kakarot didn't let up for a second and charged at his brother, delivering a flurry of kicks and punches to his abdomen. For the last month, the two brothers had been training at 5 times Earth's gravity in the gravity room that Bulma had made. Sometimes Piccolo joined them, and sometimes it was just the two of them training. Across the room, Bardock struggled to do push-ups in the increased gravity. While he wasn't strong enough to actually spar in the increased gravity, the boy had insisted on trying to train with his father and uncle. Raditz recovered from Kakarot's attack and charged back at his brother, throwing a barrage of punches at the younger Saiyan's head. Kakarot raised his hands to block the blows, staying just seconds ahead of his brother's attacks. He was still able to best his older brother fairly easily, but he could tell that Raditz was quickly closing the gap between them. Before Kakarot could react, Raditz backflipped away and charged an energy attack in his hands. Double Sunday! Raditz shouted, pouring all his energy into the attack. Kakarot crossed his arms over his chest and braced himself as the attack hit. The room shook with the explosion, but when the smoke cleared, Kakarot stood unharmed. You're getting better, he said, but you need to learn to focus your energy better. Kakarot charged at Raditz again, and the two were soon fighting as fiercely as ever. Lord Frieza, Kui said, bursting into his master's chambers. I have a priority message from one of our informants. This better be important, Frieza said, turning his cold gaze towards Kui. Oh, it is, Kui assured, bowing slightly. One of my informants just obtained some information that he thought you needed to know about. What information? Frieza asked, irritation clear in his voice. Apparently, there is another Saiyan in the universe who survived the destruction of planet Vegeta, Kui said. That isn't vital information, Frieza said dismissively. Inform the bounty hunters to go after him and bring him to me. You're wasting my time, sire, Kui continued, undeterred. One of our bounty hunters already had an encounter with this Saiyan and was defeated. He has been observing him for the past 5 years to see if he posed a big enough threat to bring in outside forces. 5 years? Frieza asked. His interest peaked. He's been observing him for 5 years and only now tells me about it. Up until now, Kui explained, the Saiyan was staying put and didn't seem like much of a threat. What has changed? Frieza inquired. He was found by Raditz, Kui said. Raditz then sent a message to Vegeta, and they are all meeting up. I think they are up to something, sire. You may very well be correct, Frieza said, a hint of menace in his voice. I want them brought to me. Tell this bounty hunter to bring them in. Sire, Kui said hesitantly, he was not powerful enough to beat the one Saiyan. He will be no match for Vegeta. What do you suggest then? Frieza asked, already sensing where this was going. I should lead an expedition to bring them in, Kui suggested. I could bring Apollo and Napple and capture the Saiyans. Or better yet, I could eliminate them. Yes, Frieza said, his eyes narrowing. The Saiyans have outlived their usefulness, but I'm not sure you are up to the task of eliminating Vegeta. You, Apulai, and Napple will go meet up with this bounty hunter, but Dodoria and Zarbon will accompany you to make sure the task is completed. Yes, my master, Kui said, bowing to his lord. And one more thing, Frieza added, his voice icy. Make sure there isn't a full moon on the day you try to take in the Saiyans. 7 months later, Kakarot stretched as he got ready for another day of training. He and Raditz had been using the gravity room nearly every day for the last 8 months. Today, they were taking a break from the gravity training to spar out in the open, so they could go all out. Beside him, Bardock came out from the house, still tying his sash around his fighting uniform. He wore a uniform identical to his father's, complete with weighted clothing. On his back, he sported a sword. The sword had been Bulma's idea. She had claimed that training the boy to use the weapon would give him an edge should any wild animals attack, while they trained occasionally in the wilderness. Kakarot had agreed and had the scientist make a weighted one for training. The boy had swung the weapon tirelessly in the gravity room, while the two brothers had sparred against each other. Are you ready yet? Kakarot asked his son. Yes, the boy replied eagerly. Can I fight someone today? We'll let you see how well your training has gone, Kakarot said with a smile. Yamcha, Tien, Chi-Chi, and Piccolo are all coming to train with us today. After a quick flight, the two Saiyans arrived at a clearing to see Raditz already waiting for them. The older son was in a meditative pose, his eyes closed. You're late, he said as the two landed. I see you've been practicing clearing your mind, Kakarot said. I have, Raditz responded. You were right. I need to learn to control my energy better. Brute strength alone won't be enough. Kakarot grinned to himself, remembering how stubborn Raditz had been the first time he had tried to get him to meditate. He had insisted that a Saiyan needed to fight to train. It had taken Kakarot owning him in a particularly fierce spar to convince the older brute that focus could sharpen fighting instincts and make him a better warrior. After the first few times he had meditated, he had noticed results quickly and kept at the additional training. Before the two brothers could talk much more, Tien, Yamcha, and Chi-Chi landed nearby. I see you taught the woman to fly, Raditz commented. I did, Yamcha said. He sighed, remembering how he had spent hours trying to teach his girlfriend to clear her mind, enough to focus her energy. That's so cool, Bardock said. Daddy taught me to fly too. How long did that take? Yamcha asked. I can only imagine how hard it would be to teach a 4-year-old to fly. I'm almost 5, Bardock said in a hurt tone. It only took a few hours, Kakarot said. The boy learns fast. A few hours, Yamcha said in disbelief. It took Chi-Chi weeks. Let's get this training started, Piccolo said, landing with a thud. Your irrational small talk is a useless waste of time. All right, Kakarot said, nodding. Bardock, Tien, Yamcha, and Chi-Chi will all work together to fight Piccolo, while Raditz and I spar. I'm just going to watch, Chi-Chi said. I can't keep up with how strong everyone is getting. Very well then, Kakarot agreed. Yamcha, Tien, and Bardock will take on Piccolo. I'm expected to fight a child? Piccolo said in disbelief. He wanted to fight Kakarot and prove that he was the strongest, but after sensing the power of both Saiyans, he realized they were out of his league and leaving him further behind by the day. That child isn't as weak as you think, Kakarot said with a smile. A few minutes later, Tien, Yamcha, and Bardock charged at Piccolo all at once. The Green Warrior dodged fists and feet right and left, staying ahead of all the attacks. Yamcha sent a left hook at the demon's face. Piccolo dodged the blow only to be hit by a knee from Tien. He flew back from the force of the blow. Before he could recover, Bardock was on him, driving a fist into his gut. The blow didn't do a lot of damage, but Piccolo was surprised by the kid's strength. Bardock had potential, that was for sure. Piccolo brought his mind back into the fight, just in time to see Tien coming in for another attack. Deciding to switch tactics, Piccolo went on the offensive. He dodged to the left and drove a fist into the Triclops' stomach. Tien doubled over and fell to the ground, temporarily out of the fight. Piccolo turned his attention to Yamcha and charged at the human warrior. Yamcha blocked a punch from Piccolo that sent him sliding back along the ground. From the force of the blow alone, he braced himself for another attack, but it never came. He looked up to see Piccolo dodging attacks from Bardock, who had a sword in his hand and was swinging it wildly at the Green Warrior. Yamcha used Piccolo's distraction to charge up an attack of his own. He cupped his hands at his side and gathered his energy. Me, he shouted, sending a beam of blue energy into Piccolo's back. The beam hit Piccolo full force and sent him flying high into the sky. A short distance away, Kakarot and Raditz were in the midst of an intense spar of their own. Raditz shot at his younger brother with a ball of energy in his hands. As soon as he reached Kakarot, he threw the attack at point-blank range. Kakarot reacted instantly, swatting the energy aside and bringing a fist in to strike his brother's face, sending the older Saiyan flying back into a cliff, smashing the rocks around him. Raditz picked himself up from the rubble and wiped a trickle of blood from his mouth. He spread his arms wide and gathered energy in both hands, concentrating hard to push more of his energy into the attack. "Double Sunday!" he shouted, bringing his arms together. The beams of energy merged into one attack and shot at Kakarot. Kakarot saw the beams coming and cupped his hands at his side. "Kamehameha!" he shouted, quickly gathering his energy and shooting it at his brother's attack. The Kamehameha wave pushed the Double Sunday aside effortlessly, and the two beams hit Raditz with earth-shattering force. Kakarot landed beside the crater his energy attack had created and picked his brother up off the ground. "Not bad," he said, smiling. "Your energy attacks are getting better." "I still can't focus that much energy that quickly," Raditz said, shaking his head. "Your attack came almost instantly and overpowered mine so easily." "That comes with practice," Kakarot said, clapping his brother on the shoulder. "Your meditation has helped though." Meanwhile, Piccolo picked himself up from the ground. That last attack had hurt. He was angry at himself for letting himself get distracted by the boy. He hadn't even seen the blast coming. His thoughts were interrupted as Bardock charged at him, swinging his sword. Piccolo moved to counter, but was interrupted as Tien floated above him and pointed a finger at the Green Warrior. "Dodon Ray!" Tien shouted, sending a beam of yellow energy at Piccolo. The Green Warrior dodged the attack, but just barely. Before he could react, he once again had a sword coming at his head. Dodging that attack, he was struck by one of Tien's Dodon rays. The beam of yellow energy burned through Piccolo's right shoulder, making the use of that arm impossible. Seconds later, Yamcha entered the fray and started throwing kicks and punches of his own at the demon. Piccolo couldn't keep up with all the attacks and was pummeled mercilessly. Minutes later, he lay on the ground, leaking purple blood from numerous wounds as his three adversaries stood above him. "You give in yet?" Yamcha said, panting slightly. Piccolo only groaned in response. He couldn't get up to fight anymore. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.